Authorities say the actor was reportedly on a family vacation in Costa Rica, swimming when he got caught in a strong current, and they say he was pulled out to...
Remember, as soon as the camera starts, something clicks off, and I do what I'm trained to do.
Staying close to my family. I like to pass on what I've learned, especially to someone as young as her, because she is our future.
Raven-Symoné, the beloved child star who brought joy to millions, is breaking down. Her voice shakes, her words falter. She can barely speak as she reflects on the sudden death of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. Words cannot describe the pain and sadness and surprise that I feel with the recent loss of MJW. She says, devastated. Why is this loss hitting Raven so hard? To understand, we have to go back to the late 1980s. The Cosby Show was a cultural phenomenon, and little Raven was introduced to America as Olivia, the adorable step-granddaughter. Audiences loved watching her run into Malcolm's arms in scene after scene that felt like perfect television. But behind the camera, a far more troubling reality was unfolding, one Raven herself didn't fully grasp at the time. I don't remember, Raven admits. As soon as the camera starts, something clicks off and I do what I'm trying to do. These aren't just words, they are evidence of a deeply rooted trauma. At only 3 years old, Raven was already dissociating to survive the environment she was placed in. Hollywood in the late 1980s and early 1990s was a dangerous place for children. Predators roamed freely, child protection laws were weak, and powerful figures in the industry had nearly unchecked access to young performers. Into this setting walked Raven not as a guest, but as a working professional. Her family needed her to work, and there was no room for error. This is a job. You can't mess up. This is not for fun, but it is fun. Make sure you respect people. Don't do this. Don't do that. Raven was taught these rules early. She wasn't treated like a toddler, she was treated like talent. Expected to memorize scripts, hit marks, smile on cue. Most children her age were still learning how to use the potty. Raven was learning how to become a product. Her talent made her shine, but it also made her a target. Raven's charisma and ability to perform made her highly valuable to studios and dangerously appealing to the wrong people. Even at 3 years old, her mind began using dissociation to cope. She would disconnect from herself during performances, only coming back after the camera stopped. This kind of psychological defense mechanism is common in children experiencing extreme stress or feeling unsafe. The fact that she needed to mentally leave her body at such a young age reveals just how inappropriate her work conditions were. Then came Malcolm-Jamal Warner. At 19 years old, Malcolm was still young, but he had already spent 5 years navigating the dangers of Hollywood. He understood the system better than most adults on set. What others missed or chose to ignore, Malcolm recognized immediately that Raven was carrying an unthinkable burden for someone her age. She came on the show at 3 or 4, and Malcolm once said, she didn't even know how to read, but she remembered what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. That always amazed me. He saw her effort and the pain underneath it. Malcolm became more than a castmate. He became her protector, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. In an industry that treated Raven like a commodity, Malcolm treated her like a kid, like a little sister who needed looking after. And in that deeply unsafe environment, his presence may have made all the difference. This wasn't just kindness, it was life-saving. Hollywood has a long history of failing child stars. Judy Garland was fed amphetamines to keep working. Disney and Nickelodeon have both faced scandals over the exploitation of young actors. In this context, Malcolm's quiet, instinctive protectiveness served as a powerful barrier. On screen, he played her Uncle Theo. Off-screen, he was something more meaningful, a shield. Raven doesn't remember every detail of their relationship, but she remembers the feeling. I still have a great relationship with Malcolm-Jamal Warner, and I don't even know why, she once said. I just know I adore him. I can't really tell you the genesis of it, but I'm sure he helped me when I needed it. That quote says a lot. Even if her conscious memory doesn't hold the specifics, her emotional memory remembers safety. It remembers Malcolm being there, and he was. Not in a performative way, but in a natural, everyday presence. He included her in conversations, treated her like family, and made her feel protected without needing to make a show of it. That kind of casual, organic protection is often more effective than formal security because predators can't easily work around it. Malcolm was also known for his maturity. Industry insiders describe him as professional, serious, and deeply committed to respectful behavior on set. While other young stars might act out or push boundaries, Malcolm held a line and people noticed. His reputation likely discouraged bad behavior around Raven. Just being nearby made it harder for predators to operate. At the time Raven joined The Cosby Show, Malcolm was transitioning from child actor to young adult. He was still close enough in age to remember what it felt like to be powerless and just old enough to understand the risks. This made him uniquely qualified to be Raven's advocate. But while Malcolm was doing what he could to protect Raven on set, the industry as a whole was still dangerous, a hunting ground for predators who knew exactly how to exploit fame, innocence, and silence. "There's so much pressure to be feminine," Raven once said. "How cute can you be without showing my sex?" That dangerous balance, being cute without crossing a line, was a gray area that predators exploited. The rules were unclear, the expectations confusing, and no one was really protecting the children from the consequences. For families like Raven's, who believed they were giving their kids opportunities, the reality was far darker. Parents were often too overwhelmed, starstruck, or financially dependent to intervene. Studio executives held all the power, and the kids had none. Raven's rapid rise only made her more vulnerable. After The Cosby Show, she became a household name, got a record deal, and would eventually star in her own Disney Channel series. The fame brought opportunity, but it also brought constant exposure to adults who may not have had good intentions. "I was doing an album at 5, Raven said, "staying in the studio until 2 or 1 in the morning. That's not normal, that's not healthy, that's child labor disguised as success. No 5-year-old should be working until 2 a.m. Yet Raven was, and that was considered normal. The entertainment industry in the 1990s was a dangerous place for children. While Raven was trying to find her footing as a rising star, the darker realities of Hollywood were unfolding around her. Predators operated freely in environments where children were vulnerable, families were under pressure, and protection was minimal. Raven's career trajectory placed her directly in harm's way not just once, but repeatedly. "There's so much pressure to be feminine. You look very attractive tonight. Thank you." That kind of exchange, innocent on the surface, was loaded with tension for a young girl. She later reflected, "How cute can you be without showing my sex?" The industry demanded that she appear charming and wholesome, but also attractive, a dangerous and confusing expectation for a child. Raven quickly learned there were things that could not be spoken aloud. Silence was part of the job. This unspoken pressure created a gray area that predators exploited. The more success Raven gained, the more she was exposed to it. Her family, like many others, believed they were providing her with opportunity. But in reality, they were sending her into a system that had failed to protect young performers for decades. Power dynamics were completely imbalanced. Children had no real advocates, and parents were often too starstruck or too financially dependent to intervene. After The Cosby Show, Raven became one of the most recognizable child stars in the country. Her fame only grew. She signed record deals, appeared on television, and eventually got her own show on the Disney Channel. But with each new achievement, she faced more exposure and more risk. At 5 years old, I was doing an album and staying in the studio until 1 or 2 in the morning, Raven shared. That fact alone reveals the industry's deep failure in protecting children. No 5-year-old should be working those hours. What should have been nurturing and creative had become exhausting and harmful, and everyone around her seemed to accept it as normal. Raven was taught not to complain. She was told to keep going, to perform, to meet expectations. She was told that this was the price of success. Meanwhile, the rest of the industry was beginning to show cracks. Investigations revealed what had long been whispered, that child actors in entertainment had been systematically abused by powerful adults in trusted positions. Dan Schneider, a major figure behind many Nickelodeon shows, was removed in 2018 after numerous allegations of inappropriate behavior. Brian Peck, a former dialogue coach, was convicted of abusing a child actor. These were not isolated incidents. They were just the cases that made it to court. For every predator who was exposed, there were dozens more who never faced justice. Raven was one of the few who survived the system without being completely destroyed by it. But that doesn't mean she was untouched. She later admitted that she became aware of her own abuse around the age of 12, but she didn't tell anyone, not her parents, not her team. "I knew I couldn't say it out loud," she confessed. "I didn't want to tell my parents." That silence made her even more vulnerable. She carried the psychological weight alone, believing that speaking the truth could destroy everything. This is how grooming works. When a child is convinced that the truth will ruin their life, they become dependent on the very system that is hurting them. They stay quiet, they stay compliant, they try to survive, and this is where Malcolm-Jamal Warner's presence becomes even more important. He wasn't just a friend from her early acting years. He was someone who remained a steady figure in her life, someone she trusted. His presence on the Cosby Show set offered a level of protection that Raven could not have gotten from anyone else. Because he knew what the industry really was. He had been through it too. He could see what others wouldn't. As Raven moved into her teenage years, that friendship continued. Malcolm wasn't physically with her every day, but his guidance remained present. In a world where so many adult men in power had exploited or manipulated her, Malcolm was different. He respected boundaries, he showed care, and most importantly, he was consistent. "I can't talk for periods of time, and I don't know how to get my words out, and I just go into my brain laying down. Sometimes I'll cry," Raven said, describing the mental toll of her childhood experiences. These weren't just emotional struggles. They were signs of real psychological trauma, the kind of trauma that, left unchecked, can lead to breakdowns or worse. In fact, Raven admitted that her pain at times led to suicidal thoughts. That's not teenage angst, that's a red flag, a warning that the emotional damage ran deep. The pressure to stay silent, stay perfect, and stay profitable had nearly cost her everything, and the industry. It rarely took responsibility. When child stars spiraled, the blame almost always landed on them or their families. Media stories focused on their breakdowns, addictions, or public missteps, not the toxic environments that created those outcomes. There was no accountability for the agents, producers, or executives who allowed it all to happen. Malcolm understood this deeply. As a child star himself, he had witnessed the exploitation from both sides as a performer and as a witness. That experience made him uniquely capable of seeing through the surface. While others ignored the signs or looked the other way, Malcolm paid attention. He offered protection not through dramatic gestures, but through presence, support, and quiet intervention. He couldn't stop everything. He couldn't undo the trauma, but he helped Raven hold on to her sense of self, her sense of worth, and her ability to heal. From the outside, Raven's life looked perfect. Record deals, sold out shows, and her face on every screen. But underneath the success was a child trying to survive a system that did not care whether she made it through in one piece. Leaving the Cosby Show also meant losing the one person who had truly looked out for her. Malcolm wasn't on the Disney Channel set. He wasn't there in the studio at 2 in the morning. His presence, protective, grounded, kind, was no longer around her every day. Her dissociation worsened. The pressure grew, the expectations multiplied. This wasn't just stage fright or nerves. This was her mind's last line of defense to mentally exit her body and perform on autopilot. "I do not remember. As soon as the camera starts, something clicks off and I do what I'm trained to do." That's not acting, that's survival. As Raven entered her teenage years, the industry's demands shifted again. Now, it wasn't just about being cute, it was about being glamorous. She had to mature without growing up too fast, had to be desirable without being sexualized, had to appear perfect without having the space to develop naturally. She didn't even know who she really was. She had been performing for so long, so consistently, that her true identity got buried under scripts, costumes, and expectations. She had become whoever the world wanted her to be, and she had no idea how to be anything else. The body-shaming Raven endured during her time on The Cosby Show didn't end as she grew older, it intensified. Industry executives, stylists, and publicists consistently scrutinized her appearance, from her weight to her wardrobe. For a teenager already struggling with self-worth and identity, this kind of hyper-focus on how she looked was crushing. She was being celebrated as a role model for young girls, while internally fighting anxiety, depression, and a fractured sense of self. Her psychological health was deteriorating, not just because of past trauma, but because of the pressure to maintain an image that wasn't even hers. Through all of this, Malcolm-Jamal Warner continued to play an important role in Raven's life. Even when he wasn't physically present, his emotional support provided a kind of stability that was rare in the entertainment world. He checked in, he offered advice, and most importantly, he reminded Raven that she was valued as a human being, not just as a product. That kind of presence mattered more than people realize. In an environment where nearly every adult interaction was transactional, where boundaries were blurred or outright ignored, Malcolm's consistency gave Raven a reference point for what healthy relationships in the industry could look like. He wasn't trying to control her, profit from her, or reshape her into someone else. He simply cared. At the same time, Raven was feeling the weight of an impossible double life. Publicly, she was the confident star. Privately, she was unraveling. She knew that speaking about her pain could end her career. People depended on her success, her family, her team, entire networks, so she stayed silent. "Even if I got sick, I'm taking this to the grave," she once said. But that eats at your soul. That single line speaks volumes about the emotional toll she carried. She would rather suffer in silence than risk exposing what she had been through. That kind of fear doesn't just appear, it is taught. It is reinforced over time by an industry that punishes truth, telling, and rewards compliance. In this landscape, Malcolm's influence wasn't just comforting, it was life-saving. His respect for boundaries, his emotional steadiness, and his belief in doing the right thing set a quiet but powerful example. He didn't lecture, he didn't push. He just showed up again and again as someone Raven could trust. And that made all the difference. Looking back, Raven has said, he was the big brother, he was a beacon, he was one of the most multifaceted, talented men, so gentle. These aren't casual compliments, they are tributes born from years of silent protection. Her grief isn't just about the death of a friend, it's about the loss of someone who kept her safe when no one else could or would. The truth is, Malcolm's legacy extends far beyond his roles on television. What he did for Raven, and likely for others, represents a kind of everyday heroism that rarely gets acknowledged. He didn't need headlines or praise. He didn't seek credit. He just did what was right. His quiet watchfulness kept people from crossing lines. His emotional intelligence gave younger actors space to breathe, and his bond with Raven gave her strength that she could carry into adulthood, even when the weight of her past threatened to break her. The industry has only recently begun to reckon with the damage it has done to child stars. Abuse scandals at networks like Nickelodeon, revelations about predatory talent managers, and testimonies from actors have painted a disturbing picture. Nearly every child performer from Raven's era was at risk. Many didn't survive the trauma. Some turned to addiction. Some disappeared. Some never recovered. What set Raven apart wasn't just her talent, it was that someone cared enough to protect her when she couldn't protect herself. Malcolm's form of protection was subtle but powerful. He didn't install rules or call attention to himself. Instead, he created a space around Raven where inappropriate behavior simply wasn't tolerated. By including her in conversations, keeping her in his line of sight, and maintaining an open line of communication as she matured, he formed a kind of natural barrier that predators couldn't easily breach. This kind of protection is difficult to replicate. It requires someone who genuinely cares, who understands the risks, and who is willing to take on the responsibility quietly. It cannot be faked. It cannot be manufactured. And it saved her. Raven didn't avoid trauma altogether. The effects of her childhood stardom left scars, dissociation, identity confusion, mental health challenges, but she avoided some of the worst outcomes. She didn't spiral into addiction. She didn't disappear from the world. She fought her way through. When I turned 18, I knew something was going on. So I started going to therapy and its dissociation, Raven explained. That self-awareness, that choice to heal is rare. Many child stars never reach that level of understanding. Malcolm's steady influence may have helped her get there. Because of that foundation, Raven chose to do more than survive. She became a guide for others. She began to use her platform to speak to younger generations. My focus is really for the kids, she says. I tell them it's important to know who you are, and it's important to take control of your self-worth. That message, one of identity, awareness, and boundaries, echoes the lessons she learned from Malcolm. Not through lectures, but through example, through care, through consistency. As Hollywood continues to uncover its past and attempt reform, voices like Malcolm's are more necessary than ever. He wasn't just an actor, he was a quiet advocate, a protector, a role model for what the industry could look like if more people chose to lead with integrity. His death came at a time when the entertainment world was finally starting to reckon with its failures. That loss is more than personal, it is symbolic. Malcolm represented the kind of protective presence the industry desperately needs and often lacks. Losing him feels like losing a shield, not just for Raven, but for others like her. For Raven, the grief is layered. First, there were the people who hurt her, then the people who stood by and did nothing. Now, she has lost the person who helped her make sense of it, all the one who reminded her that she mattered beyond her performances. Malcolm-Jamal Warner's greatest role may not have been on screen. It was in the quiet way he protected someone who needed him. No cameras, no scripts, no applause, just a young man who saw a little girl in danger and chose to stand by her. That is the kind of legacy that changes everything.